All right, Joe Speak podcast. We got a good one today. I've got Derrick Smith, who is a career public defender in San Bernardino County since 2007. He's handled everything from simple possession to murder in his trials. He's been on both sides. He's interned in the DA's office, worked in Contra Costa County, worked in San Francisco, and is actually a supervisor in his office as well, dealing with the post-conviction unit, really having a lot to say about how the PD does their thing. The public defender does their thing, does their duty as a last line of defense for people that need competent attorneys that help them have their right to jury trial. So we're going to unpack a whole lot of things. Him professionally, him personally as an African-American man, his observations of police, how culture affects the charges that he ends up having to defend, and looking at the framework of what we have left because of George Floyd, what we have left because of Ahmaud, what we have left because of Elijah McClain, and how we figure in each and every one of us. He's also going to encourage you to do your jury service, by the way, too, which as a trial attorney, I can appreciate as well. So it's important for us to be on hand, and Derrick is going to give us some guidance on helping us do that based on what he does every day. So let's go. So we ready to go in? All right, let's go in. Okay, just like I said, here we are, Joe Speak Podcast, Joe Richardson. Glad to have somebody who, fortunately, sometimes you get two things at once. You get somebody who you know and trust personally, who's a dear friend, but somebody who's also at the top of their field. And I think that this happened once again today. I've got Derrick Smith, who's an attorney and supervisor in the San Bernardino County Public Defender's Office. Some of us are 20 years out of law school still trying to figure out what we want to do. Derrick Smith, everybody knew from freshman year that he wanted to be a defense attorney. And it was connected to how he grew up, what his observations were. It's his passion and it's his mission and his purpose to help folks that need help. And he's done this through his job and done very well at it. And I think that this is a timely discussion for that reason. So Derrick, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm great. First off, thanks for having me, giving me the opportunity to talk about something I am very passionate about. So thank you for having me, invite me on.
Oh man, thank you, man. We are guest driven, so we bring the expertise and the reality of folks that are doing what they're doing every day. So it's really important. It's great that we get opportunity to do that here. So let's start off with your background in terms of how you knew that you wanted to be at criminal law and some of your observations that inform your decision to go into criminal law. And then we'll talk more about how those observations are manifesting even now.
Okay. So I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. I grew up 2 minutes from where the Rodney King riot started.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of, that firsthand. I have seen people in my neighborhood, good people, down on their luck, bad times, rough times, do things that are uncharacteristic of who they are as a person. Right. And, once that happens, they're sometimes gobbled up by the system and, metaphorically speaking, never to be seen from again because of the path that they've been sort of pushed down.
Sure.
And so seeing those things, always being a advocate for the underdog, it speaks to me.
Right.
In the intro, you said, talked about, both sides of the table that I've been on. I was in the DA's office in San Francisco as an intern. I worked directly under Kamala Harris when I was there.
Sure.
And had an opportunity to see the prosecution side. And then later on in law school, I had an opportunity to work in the Contra Costa Public Defender's office. And it was just something about being there and being on the side of that table and that fight that felt right for me. That was home. That was where the passion really sort of spoke to me, gave me some purpose, and um, I don't devalue the time that I spent in the DA's office because it gave me some very valuable perspective. So when I'm talking to DAs, baby DAs, um, I kind of get a sense of how they are approaching cases because when I was in the DA's office, I read a police report, and that police report was the Bible. I was like, man, this is what the cop said. This is how it is,
Right.
and that's the truth. I mean, I took it word for word,
Right.
and I was like, why are these people on the other side contesting, what's said in this police report?
Sure.
Police officer wrote it. It's there. That's what happened. And then I get, to the other side. And I'll remind you, I grew up in South Central LA. So I had already experienced the context of, the interaction.
Sure.
But then once you get in the office and you're doing the work, something about it sort of changed my perspective and my outlook. And I was, reading those police reports like they were the Bible. And then I get to the public defender's office and actually talking to the client and then able to read the reports, listen to what the client is saying, and dissect what was said in the reports and what the client is saying and say, okay, I see, the different versions of the story and how they play out. And then you factor in the law and you factor in, uh, the big picture. It's really compelling to have both sides of the picture, and I think that's made me a better advocate on the defense side, is to kind of understand the perspective of the DA, and then to hear the story of my client, and then be able to bring all of that together. And if we have to go to trial, present that, or if we resolve it before, I can at least give a compelling story for my client to the DA when we are trying to talk about a disposition. So my background has certainly given me an opportunity to represent my clients in a sort of well-rounded um, approach.
Right. Excellent. So talk to me about, as a public defender, you've been in San Bernardino County the better part of 15 years. Talk about your rise there, kind of the before and the after in terms of the things that you were dealing with at first and how it's proceeded. Because what I really want to do is build a house so that folks really know, get your perspective, not only as a man, but as an attorney and as a PD and as a managing public defender, what's really going on. And then we can unpack some of these larger societal issues too, and how it compares to your experience.
Sure. So my um, introduction into the PD's office, and I was always of the belief that throw me to the wolves. I want to get in there and I want to learn.
Right.
And so that is, the approach is that you get a lot of cases to work up, to handle as a young attorney. And in our office, you generally start out in misdemeanors.
Right.
And so I tried a bunch of misdemeanors. It was always from the perspective of the client. What does the client want to do? I'd advise the client, hey, here's the information that we received from police office. Here is what the DA's office has filed. This is what they've charged you with. Talk to the client about their perspective, and we sort of work through that. And my goal at the end of each case is to be able to look at myself in the mirror and think that I did a good job and I can sleep good at night.
Right.
And so, in order for me to do that, I have to give a client all the information that they need to make the best decision for them, whether that's going to trial, whether that's resolving the case prior to trial. I can't make that decision for a client. I can give them some advice. I can say, hey, based on X, Y, and Z, this is what I think, but I'm not in your shoes. I don't know what your family situation is. I don't know what your job situation is. So let's talk about options. Let's talk about what trial looks like. Let's talk about their witnesses. Let's talk about your witnesses. So in being a solid defense attorney, you've got to lay it all out. I mean, you can't, pick and choose what you talk to your client about. You got to give them the whole picture. Because if you don't have all of the information, how are you making the best decision for you? And so that was my approach. And as the cases, became tougher and the exposure greater, the process for me was still the same. More investigation, more details, but the process and the way that I develop and build a case was always the same. Now, going to trial, every case that I tried wasn't the same. Um, the same with Bill Belichick, love him or hate him.
Right.
He isn't going to play a 16 game season the exact same way.
Right.
So, in terms of a trial, my strategies changed depending on what we were doing in trial, what the factors were, what were the strengths, and what were the weaknesses. And so, I'm also over our training division and
Right. Wow.
helping our newer attorneys understand that when you're in misdemeanors, you need to try a bunch of different cases. You need to try different strategies, try different methods, because you have to find out who you are as a defense attorney. And it
Right.
took me several years to figure out what worked for me, what didn't work for me. And so I found my style and what works for me. It's the passion, is getting up and speaking and then sharing my client's story. It's humanizing my client. It's being genuine, because a jury will see right through someone trying to get up in front of them
For sure.
and con them.
Oh yeah.
So, I'm not that guy. I'm the
Right.
guy that's going to be honest with you, open with you. In voir dire, I want people to the jury panel to see that I'm a regular guy. I'm not some slimy defense attorney, and
Right.
I have that conversation all the time. I talk to them about who I am as a person. I let them know my mother's proud of me and the work that I do, even though I am a defense attorney.
Right.
Um, and so we have to be comfortable in our skin as a defense attorney, knowing that we are a part of the process that is necessary.
Sure.
And being a part of that process, we have to be the last line of defense, the checks and balances. And I can tell you from my side of the table, it's difficult when you're fighting against the police department, you're fighting against the
Sure.
DA's office, and sometimes you're fighting against the bench as well.
Right.
And so, if you look at that, that's a 3-on-1 fight.
Right.
And oftentimes it's only me and my client sitting at the table, defending these cases. So it's a daunting task,
Right.
but I'm up for the challenge. I've been up for the challenge. I still enjoy the work. I still am passionate about it.
Right.
And, I've had the discussion with, my family and friends. The point that I lose the passion is the point that I need to go.
Yeah.
And I'm still passionate about the work. The times now speak more to that passion, because, we're peeling back some of um, the layers of that onion that people have wanted to avoid.
Right.
And I want to be there right there in the fight, dealing with this, because it is important. I mean, I want my son to have uh, an opportunity to walk in our neighborhood and not fear what I fear, walking down the street. And I don't live in the inner city anymore. I'm in the burbs.
Right.
Um, I- but I don't walk without fear from being stopped by law enforcement and questioned. Um, and talking about the culture and the different things, and I'll let you go into that later. But that's a factor, man. And
Right.
the experiences that I've had standing in the hallways of court and being undressed by officers who I'm about to cross-examine in a trial or in a preliminary hearing,
Sure.
um, it can be intimidating.
Right.
And there have been times where I have been intimidated, but then I had to, dial it back. I'm like, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm doing a job and I am doing right by my client. And so it took me some time. Now it's a different story. I don't succumb to that same sort of intimidation as I did when I was younger in my career. Because, hey, at times they were more seasoned. They knew a few more tricks than I did, and they were able to sometimes dance around some of my questions. Um, but with experience and with time, I'm able to see things in a different light. The same way that I say that, out in the community, if I'm walking down the street, that I may be fearful of a contact, um, I still think that I am in a pretty solid position in how to handle that contact. Um, it's it's sad to say that I have these conversations with myself on how to survive
Yeah.
a contact with law enforcement,
Sure.
and just having a conversation with myself, just thinking about in terms of that surviving a contact with law enforcement. I mean, those are conversations that I have. I have them when I'm driving my car. I have them about me walking down the street. I have them about me leaving a store,
Right.
because I've been followed in stores in um, Oxford shoes,
Right. Sure.
bow ties, because I wear bow ties on Fridays, and just walking around the store being followed. I'm like, I don't know how more professional I can look with this
Right.
bow tie on and this button down shirt and these dress shoes, and still get followed around the store. Um, so just processing all of the different scenarios that could potentially happen to me. And I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law for quite some time now. And so, young men that are in their sort of testosterone heightened years
Sure.
being contacted and questioned when they're not doing anything is agitating.
Right.
Because I can
Sure.
say for me, if I'm doing nothing wrong and someone stops me and wants to ask me, what am I doing? I don't want to have that conversation with you. I'm minding my own business. That's what I'm doing.
Right.
And I don't want you to stop me, ask me what I'm doing when it seems like you were just harassing me or trying to intimidate me. And unfortunately, that's how cases escalate. And we're talking about the culture. If a young man is walking down Main Street, California, and a police officer um, make contact with him, it almost has to be adversarial for that individual to maintain their rights.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I'll explain that. If a young man is walking down the street, headphones on, or um, just walk without headphones, and a cop comes in contact with him and says, hey, can I talk to you for a second? The second that individual says, sure, a lot of things start to happen after that.
Kind of opens
So
the door, right? A lot of people don't think of it that way, but it actually
it
opens the door on some
it
level.
does, and it makes it more challenging for us if something goes bad in that contact in court. So essentially, what law enforcement and the prosecutors do is they say that that was a consensual contact, and because that's a consensual contact, you're not detained. You're technically believed to be able to walk away at any time. Um, I can tell you that there aren't many people that feel like if a police officer is having a conversation with them, they can just end it and walk away. However, I would preface that by saying, am I being detained? Am I free to leave? Because if they say yes, then you walk away and you end the conversation, because it's probably going to go bad if you continue to stay there
Mm.
in that conversation. Um, and the reason I say you almost have to be adversarial at the beginning of the contact is because if you say no, I don't want to talk to you, or you don't stop to talk to them, then they have to detain you. And if they haven't seen you doing anything prior to that detention, we have the tools and the laws on our side to deal with that in court. Um, but it changes the narrative at the beginning if it was a consensual contact. Then you have to escalate it even more and say, okay, I'm leaving. I don't want to be here. I don't want to have this conversation with you. And then you force the officer to then detain you. And so it's the law has put young men in a really difficult
Yeah,
situation.
they're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a real big catch 22. And I advise my family, like, do not have the conversation, wait for me. Let somebody that knows and understands, what the nuances are, to have that conversation with you. Don't do it one on one, because you are going to lose that battle.
Mm.
And The officers are savvy. The law says that they can lie to you and say different things. Well, the law doesn't call it a lie. The law calls it a ruse. Officers can use a ruse in their investigations. So it's really difficult for a young man to navigate a stop like that,
Right.
and do it in a sense that keeps them safe. And
That's good. Let me go here because I want to build on what you just said. First of all, where I really wanted to go, and you're going there now, is just the idea that your experience as a PD and as an attorney has not changed the initial notions that you had related to the police. Okay, necessarily.
No.
Am I correct there?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the next thing? Because here's one of the things I hear a lot. When you're a lawyer and somebody asks you, "Hey, I watched Law and Order. I really like it. Is it real?" And so I think that this is the beginning of a opportunity, and you're already talking about it in terms of your initial contact. That does two things. First of all, it gives people some notion of how a contact can start, how contact is supposed to start, how contact is not supposed to start. But in this Law and Order moment, this is really what I want you to do is, unpack one or two of these situations that we've been watching on the news. Pick one and say, well, we all have our opinions on it, but what can you give somebody, not even necessarily that they have to think like a lawyer, but here's something about this contact, and I already got some of it in terms of the initial notion. What is it that you can give them about this contact or this situation that just walking down the street and watching CNN, they're just not going to get?
So the young man in Colorado was walking down the street. I believe he was wearing a ski mask,
Right.
but
right.
had a bag in his hand.
Right.
Didn't seem like he was running or trying to get anywhere particularly fast, but just walking with a ski mask on.
Yeah, Elijah McClain.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's contacted, and a lot of times what happens is if you don't have the response that the officer wants you to have,
Yeah.
it quickly becomes contempt of cop.
Right.
And once you're in that realm of contempt of cop, things start to escalate pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
And questions like asking what's going on or why are you doing this agitates some officers. Like,
Right.
why are you asking me? I'm the police. I get to ask you the questions. You don't get to ask me questions.
Right.
And simply trying to understand like what's happening, because I would do the same thing in a situation where I'm being contacted. I want to know why, what's going on, because initially you are shocked. Like, hey, I was just walking down the street minding my own business and you're stopping me. What's happening?
Right.
And so the anxiety goes up. And when the anxiety starts to go up, there's a little bit of panic. You're trying to figure out, okay, what's going on?
Sure.
These guys are surrounding me. They have guns and weapons. I don't.
Right.
You are afraid. And I think most people would be afraid being surrounded by people that are armed and you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't answer the questions the way that they want, and in California, we often get cases where a client has been, in the officer's eyes, less than cooperative by asking questions and not doing things responsibly fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so that person will find themselves charged with resisting, obstructing, or delaying an officer, which is California Penal Code Section 148, A1. And then there's also, if it escalates and there's some sort of a scuffle and the client gets some scratches or some bruises or some lumps, they're also going to be charged with PC 69, which is resisting the executive officer. So those cases came across my desk quite often. And
Wow.
when we talk about cultures, you'll have certain departments that are known for filing a bunch of these 148s and 69s. And you see them, and when you see your client, you're expecting to see your client with some sort of bruises, scrapes, and scratches, like there was some sort of scuffle. You see the charges, and you kind of it's the progression, and you know it. And oftentimes, it is a person not saying things fast enough, not responding fast enough, and that's the culture. That culture of do it now because I said so is what hurts the relationships in the community. If it's two people having a conversation and understand one, the officer being professional and handling um, the person that they're contacting with some respect, then you have a different interaction. You have two people having a conversation. I can't say that all interactions are going to go like that. Some
Right.
people are just not going to be pleased about the contact, and they're going to start um, getting excited at the very beginning of the contact. That's
Right.
going to happen. I mean, I don't think that you can rule that out as a profession. The same with me. I'm going to have some clients that are just unhappy with their past experience with the public defender, past experience with the criminal justice system, and are just upset for no other reason than I am doing my job as a public defender.
Right.
I accept that, I recognize that, and I give those clients the same amount of respect and courtesy that I give the ones that are coming to me with, "Hi, Mr. Smith, how are you doing? I'm glad you're working on my case." Everybody gets the same approach, and sometimes those individuals that are agitated just want to be heard,
Right.
and it's not a matter of um, they're upset because no one has listened to them. And so oftentimes the person that's agitated from the very beginning, I overcome that by just sitting down and listening, giving them 10 minutes to get whatever it is off of their chest.
Right.
And now they're like, okay, you can talk to me about my case. I've said what I had to say about all the things that, are bothering me. And oftentimes that person has had several days to sort of sit and stew about what's happened to them.
Yeah. Sure.
And if it was one of these things where it was a contempt of cop type of situation, yeah, they've been upset for several days, and they've talked to other people that have, been in custody and, shared similar stories. And so it's festered over those several days. And then, they get to talk to somebody that they attach to the criminal justice system, and I get lashed out at,
Right.
which is, I kind of understand it. And
Yeah.
I, try to give the client that opportunity to vent, and it allows us to then move forward and build a relationship once they've got the opportunity to be heard. And
I
and I think
go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish your thought. I'm
and I
sorry.
think that's part of the thing on the street as well. If there's a conversation on the street and the officer takes the time to listen and hear where that person is coming from, they may have had a bad contact in the past and are
Sure.
still living off of that bad contact. But then this person comes in and is now nothing but professional, and giving that person a chance to get off their chest that last bad contact.
Mm.
Now we're moving in a direction of two people having a conversation and working through whatever issue there is at that time. And that's not where we are. And I can tell you firsthand that I've had some bad contacts with law enforcement, professionally and in my personal life. And um, you I expect a level of professionalism uh, when I am contacted by law enforcement. And I can't say that that's happened every time that I've had contact.
Mm. Let me go here. I think one of the things that I am sure you probably hear, not only in your work, but from family, from friends, and things like that, are just somebody getting rolled up in the system. You're in the system. We can never get out. I'm looking at a third strike. When that was a big issue. I'm not saying it still is. It isn't. But um, tell me about your observations of the punitive focus of the criminal justice system, and how that affects and how that informs what you do every day.
So the good thing about my office is we take a position of we're trying to deal with the entire person. We take a holistic approach. What's the root of the problem? What can we do to provide them with additional services once their case is resolved? Is it a mental health issue? We connect them with mental health professionals. We have social workers within our office that can connect our clients to services outside of what we do. If there are um, housing issues, child issues, the whole person is what we are trying to with when we have our clients, and it's all about the client. It's what can we do now with their process, so we can help them, and then we can also advocate with the other departments within the county and say, hey, look, let's get to the root of the problem. Let's try and address what's happening prior to. A lot of theft cases happen as a result of uh, drugs. And so you'll see a person who has been in and out of jail will have theft and drugs, theft and drugs, theft and drugs. The two kind of work hand in hand. And so there are drug programs, and people are, given the opportunity to work through these drug programs. But it happens so much earlier if you see what's going on in our juvenile divisions.
Sure.
You see the process beginning with juveniles that have a difficult home life. And when you have that difficult home life, you look at some of our juveniles, and it's heartbreaking because you're thinking, like, how does this kid have a chance? And they're dealing with all of this before the age of 13.
Right.
And you have kids whose parents, or they're being taken from their parents, or their parents are struggling with addiction, mental health issues, being in and out of jail. Um, it's heartbreaking to see the cases. It's heartbreaking to feel helpless in the sense that um, our entire system isn't um, set up to heal the person so they don't become a part of the system.
Right.
And um, there's a lot that we're trying to do to deal with what these issues are. And San Bernardino County's Department of Behavioral Health has done a good job of working with our office and helping us with our mental health diversion, which is new. And so that gives us an opportunity to divert people who may have had a case as a result of some sort of mental health issue. And I can't talk enough about how mental health is a big issue with
Sure.
crime.
Yeah.
There was I can't remember the guy's name, but there was an incident where a law enforcement went out and contacted a guy who was at home, um, naked, and the mom called, I believe, and law enforcement goes out, and the person's agitated. That's pretty consistent with someone being or suffering from mental health issues, is that agitation.
Yeah.
I actually sat in on a town hall earlier this week with Chris Gardner, who's a public defender in my office, Jason Anderson, the DA in the district attorney's office, and McMahon, the sheriff. And that, is one of the things that is sort of discussed, is dealing with the mental health and having non-law enforcement respond
Right.
to
Sure.
those. And so there's an effort to try and have non-law enforcement people respond to those types of incidents where it's not a necessarily a crime happening, but there's someone who's suffering from some sort of mental health issue, and to deal with that with non-law enforcement personnel, because law enforcement personnel goes out, they're not necessarily equipped with handling some person that's dealing with a crisis, some sort of mental health crisis. Um, Social workers are much better equipped to deal with that, and we have some social workers in our office, and they do talk to our clients, and they do understand how to deal with um, individuals that are dealing with a particular mental health crisis. Our social workers are not sent out to that's a whole different thing. I'm just saying that they are able
Right.
to deal with that because they have the training and they've done the school work to understand how to deal with a person that's suffering through crisis.
So the notion is that if you think through, and this is what kind of what I want to talk about next, just solutions, mental health as an example, is that maybe there are some situations where police aren't best equipped, but if police are the ones that are going and something happens, there's agitation, it tends to end up in a criminal charge,
Correct.
you know.
Absolutely.
And so I'm seeing that, that being discussed a lot from your perspective. Give me some of your thoughts about some of the solutions related to this policing conundrum that we have. We've got this conflict between officer safety and community safety. Most of us don't want to do harm to a police officer. Okay. But there's many of us in communities that don't feel like that they're protecting and serving us. So talk to me about some of the solutions, based on what your experience and what you've seen in terms of this conundrum of policing. And, there's 8 can't wait, and there's all of these other things. What are some of the things that you see that may make sense in terms of dealing with some of these issues we have now?
So the big thing is leadership.
Sure.
And
Heard that before. Yeah. Jim Bierman said the same thing. Yeah.
leadership has to drive the shift in how you deal with the community that you are policing.
Right.
Um, you, as a police officer assigned to an area, become a part of that community.
Yeah.
If at least during the time that you are working. Um, I am not a cop basher. I am one that will hold police officers to a high standard and go through every check and balances that I'm given the opportunity to do in my job.
Right.
I understand the need for police.
Right.
I also understand the need for people to feel safe in their communities and not have the mindset that I do, that I have to prepare myself to survive these interactions. I've had contact with a lot of police officers throughout my career, and I have befriended police officers. I went to college and played football with guys that are now police officers. So, on an individual basis, on a professional basis, there are police officers that I respect. And there's nothing more satisfying than two professionals sparring in the courtroom
Right.
within the bounds of the law and within the bounds of professional decency.
Right.
Every police officer that I cross examine gets the benefit of a good morning, a good afternoon. How are you doing today? Because it's professional courtesy that I'm going to extend to you as far as you give it to me. Now, if you choose to not be professional back, hey, I got to do my job. I'm there to represent my client, but I extend that courtesy first.
Right. Right.
And that's the same thing that I would expect for a police officer in the community to do to me,
Right.
not to, sort of mean mug me, not to look me up and down, not to size me up, but to greet me, good afternoon, how are you doing? Or good morning, how are you doing? That starts the interaction in a different light than the confrontational aspect. However, because of how the law is, my response would be good morning, good afternoon in the community, whatever it is, and keep on moving. I'm not going to stop and engage in conversation because again, that puts me back in that situation where the contact could go good or bad. But I'm just saying, as far as a contact, how you approach that contact, approaching it with a good afternoon, good morning, starts it on a whole different um, tone than the stare downs and the sizing up. What do we do as a community and a culture is have real conversations and not be dismissive about how people feel. Um, I don't feel like I need to survive a police encounter for no reason. I mean, there are
Coming from a place.
very articulable reasons and instances that I can say concern me, and the things that I've seen in my career, where something really simple as what's going on here turns into a client having a black eye or a broken rib. It really shouldn't be that. And
Right.
so it's the mutual respect of treating your community the same way you want to be treated.
Right.
And so it starts with the leadership not condoning
Yes.
the
Yes.
bad actors,
Right.
and the leadership saying, we're not going to protect those bad actors, because the culture of the departments is we protect our own.
Right.
I mean, the blue code is real.
Right.
And it extends not just to the police departments, but it extends to the district attorney's office as well. Because when those things are brought up and mentioned, we're like, hey, this particular officer is doing X, Y, Z. And if you see it continue to happen from that same person, you're like, all of these different clients who don't know each other and are having the same exact contact and experience, and no one's doing anything about it, that's a problem. And that goes to the whole umbrella of protection.
Right.
You've got the umbrella of protection with the police unions.
Right.
So the leadership has to believe in the direction of unbiased policing and treating the inner cities the same as they are treating the suburbs. And so if leadership buys into it, and I think the community has to keep on the leadership, and the community has to continue to say, look, this is what we want. These are our communities. You guys are
Right.
policing
Right.
our communities. This is how we want to be policed.
Right.
And there is going to be some give and take in how that happens, but it starts with a relationship. There aren't a whole lot of good relationships between communities and police departments. Um, I can say that there is some effort in moving in that direction, but again, none of this happens unless the leadership in law enforcement decides to say, yes, we agree with that, and we are going to make some changes in those areas. Because the things that I'm hearing behind the scenes are um, disheartening, but at the same time, I'm encouraged because I see the fight in the community.
Right.
So the community is going to have to keep on fighting to change the direction of leadership, because those are elected positions. And if people are saying, hey, this is what I want out of my leadership, this is what I want to see from your departments, then that has an impact. And when I go back to leadership and the culture and the protection, let's go to George Floyd. Let's talk about those two officers that were um, 3 and 4 days on the job that didn't say a word.
Right.
Right? These guys are helping pin a guy down who hasn't moved in several minutes, whose pulse is faint if there's a pulse at all.
Right.
And only one of them, the white officer, decided to ask the more senior officer if they should move.
Right.
The other guy didn't say a word. And we're talking about guys that are 3 and 4 days on the 3 or 4 shifts, however long, but very new on the job. The culture was already shared
I
with
already
them.
know.
You
Yeah.
don't question your superior officer.
Right.
3 and 4 days in.
Unto death.
So
Right. Unto
so
death.
we're talking about the guy who I can't remember, Kyung, if that's how you pronounce it, Alexander Kyung,
Right.
didn't say a word.
Right. Sure.
Chauvin was his field training officer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he knew in the short time that he was on the job not to question what he was doing. Although he might have felt in his heart that what he was doing was wrong,
Right.
he didn't say a word. So that's a direct reflection of the leadership that I can't say anything. I can't challenge what I believe to be morally right. And it goes to um, that whole idea that leadership has to drive the change.
Right. Wow, that's huge. Let me ask you this. This has been great. I appreciate this. But here's my public service announcement part. You know, it's one of those things where you like to tell somebody something and they don't listen to you. You know, all of us with kids, that's how it happens. You know, somebody comes to you, your kid comes to you and say, you know what such and such told me? Oh, yeah, what I've been telling you for 15 years. But I just play it off, you know, like somebody, they listen as long as they got it. So
Yes.
I'm hoping you help me with this. Just the notion of how important being involved in the system is, including the dreaded jury service. How that is really important to have all voices at the table, particularly voices of people of color and African Americans. Help me with that.
So I'm not a huge social media poster, but I did after about a week of struggling through what I watched with George Floyd. Um, people have been reaching out to me. What can we do? Like, how do we help? Um, the first and easiest step is stop hiding from jury service.
Wow. See.
Go and respond to your jury summons. And the reason that that's important is if I'm sitting at the table and someone is defending me, and I look around and I don't see any faces looking back at me that look like me, that have shared my life experiences, that have shared the experiences that I have out in society, in the community, in my professional life, if I don't see those people looking back at me and participating in the process, I'm not going to feel like I am actually being represented and a full voice of my community is speaking up for me.
Right.
I can tell you that I have been been in trial and look back at the panel and seen a handful of Black people.
Right.
And one of the first things that happened is the court gives an opportunity to discuss hardships. And I can't tell you the sinking feeling of watching every single Black person raise their hand to be excused for a hardship. Some are valid, some don't get paid, and that's something I want to talk to you about before we end this. But some people don't get paid. Understand that you got to eat, you got to provide for your family, but find a way to participate in the process because we have unique experiences within our communities that say someone from the suburbs may not. So when you're back in that jury room and you're deliberating and you're talking about the context of things that have happened because you don't go into that jury service in a vacuum. Yeah, you're supposed to leave your biases and all that out, but everything that you heard in that trial should be discussed in context and context of what the officer said, context in what the witnesses said, context in how it happened in the community, what was observed with the evidence. And so if you want to be a part of the process, you want to be a part of the process that holds officers accountable when they are actually charged. The only way to do that is to be in the room when the case is being heard. And you
Sure.
can't be in the room when the case is being heard if you take the first opportunity to exit the train.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've got to be a part of the process. And it's so important to bring your perspective and to bring your experiences to that, because everyone else that's in the deliberating room has their own experiences that they bring to the conversation. So, in order for it really to be a jury and a process where your peers are examining the facts, we got to have all of the perspectives in the room.
Right.
Otherwise, it's sort of a system that sees certain groups punished differently because their voices aren't being heard, their experiences aren't being brought to the table, and the context isn't being shared. So that's the big thing that can be done right away. Now, and I said I wanted to talk about this before we end it. Um, it's something that, and I know you have some political sort of background, that we should really talk about every person in California that's eligible to be a juror get at least 10 days to do their jury service.
Mm.
Um,
Paid, right? Is that what you're saying?
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes,
Yeah,
so
makes
that they
sense.
can be a part of the process. Because,
Sure.
of course, if you look at communities that are um, underserved, you can connect that to socioeconomic status as well.
Right.
And there are some people that are not responding to their summonses because they're like, I can't miss work.
Right.
So if you get the opportunity to be a part of the process and know that you're not going to have to worry about paying rent or making sure that food's on the table, then you get a chance to participate in the process. And the reason that I throw 10 days out as a number is the majority of our jury trials are done in 10 days or less.
Mm.
So that gives a lot of people the opportunity to participate in the process of a jury trial. And it would change the direction of the criminal justice system, because you would have more people of color's voices being heard in
Sure.
that process, in the holding accountable of those that are in the process of are in the trial process.
That's huge. Well, Derrick, man, now listen, I appreciate you bringing truth and talking about some of the things that need to be talked about. You are in the belly of the beast, and so while a lot of folks have theories and they have opinions, and they talk about them, you've dedicated your life to actually being the last line of defense for people that need a voice, and you're carrying out what we have a constitutional right to have as citizens anyway. So I appreciate your work. I thank you for helping us clarify some things and unpack some things. And, we will be in touch like we always are. And we wish you your continued success for all our sakes in fighting the good fight, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to at least share a perspective,
Right.
of where we are and where we're coming from. That we are, a vital part of the community, and we are trying to do our part to help the community.
Right.
So, I don't believe everyone sees that, but those that have used us, or family members that have had to um, use our services, kind of understand the role that we play. And sometimes it's not until a person has had to come in contact with our office that they really understand the role
Yeah.
that we play in the community, and what our services do to keep that sort of checks and balances um, together.
Excellent. Fantastic. Bam, we got it. So, Derrick Smith was great. He let us know some real important things. I thought it was really important to have him on. First of all, I mean, I can't say enough about jury service. Jury service is low-hanging fruit that all of us could do. And so much, people make so much about, much ado about getting off of jury service. And it makes an incredible difference for someone who might be facing on the civil side or on the criminal side, some kind of life-altering situation. And then criminal, you're talking about somebody's freedom. So that's a really important thing to do. That's what we're doing. And one of the consistent themes, and I appreciate Derrick mentioning it to me, because Jim Bierman said the same thing. It's all about leadership. Everything starts with leadership. And so the hook was that when someone disrespects him in the hallway and looks at him, you know, as the public defender, like he's the public enemy, like he's not somebody that should be dealt with or should be respected. That's a direct impact of leadership. And so, you know, there could be leaders that are well-intentioned at the top and something doesn't filter down to the bottom. But it should be known that what leaders stand for and what leaders don't stand for. And I think strong leadership, and whether you're talking about police department, whether you're talking about your law department, whether you're talking about what it is that you're working with, but particularly things that have to do with public service and public servants. And police are public servants. They do an incredible, impossible job, frankly. But that being said, that's not to say that they shouldn't uphold a standard. We shouldn't lower the standard because they do a difficult job. We should keep the standard there, but we should empower them the best way we can. And so that's why some of these alternatives pertaining to dealing with mental health, with dealing with homelessness, some of the nonviolent contacts that could keep someone from being in trouble on paper, maybe those ought to go somewhere else. And so we're going to continue having more somewhere else other than having police have to deal with them. We'll be talking more about all of this as a society, as a podcast, you know, in our walks of life, about what we do as a society. Policing is the last line of defense, often for many of us to feel safe and to be safe, and everything flows from safety. So it has to be a central conversation. So let's keep having it. You can follow us at, you can go to the Joe Speak podcast on YouTube. You can follow us at Joe Speak on Instagram and on Twitter. And until next time, let's keep bridge building one conversation at a time. All right.